Okay, let's talk about jargon. This is quite important. You might want to go back to this video a few times during the training course to get a recap about how it all fits together and what all these new terms are. Some are familiar to you, some might not be, but it is good to have them at least in one overview. Because I don't, during the training course, want to go back every time to what a specific thing actually means. Started off with the IDE. I mentioned that already before. You might have wondered, what is that? That's an integrated developer environment. So, as it says, a software application supporting development, and it contains all kinds of stuff that you need to do development. So it's like a one place where everything comes together. So you make your code, you do some automation there, you do some debugging in there. We're going to see how that all works. For the ABAP RESTful Programming, we use Eclipse as the IDE, and that is the software that you need to install. And without Eclipse, nothing happens. So that is your tool to build everything. Now, you're probably already familiar with the SAP Data Dictionary. You've got domains, data elements, database tables, and views. As you can see here, a short description what they all mean. Because I find it always a bit important to keep it simple, you know, when you try to explain what a domain is, for example. It defines whether it is an alphanumeric, whether it's an integer, a Boolean character, which is basically yes, no. But you can also add values to a domain, and we're going to do that in our training exercise. And then you also have data elements. Data elements are then used in database tables, and you can merge various database tables in a view. And we're going to create views as well. Well, actually, not physically. It is done by the system. It is done by the system when you do something within the core data services. And this is new for a lot of people. This is really necessary to create the Fiori apps. This is the way how you collect your data and how you present it in the app. So you start first with data definitions. This is basically your link with the data dictionary. It comes in two flavors. You've got an interface and you've got a consumption side. And we in the next video I explain a bit more what the difference is between the two. You've got metadata extensions. That is mainly to control how the app is going to look like. Yeah, so you can play with a lot of controls. Later on in this training course, I go a bit deeper in how you can use the metadata extensions to display certain things at a particular place on the screen. Access controls are very important because that is where your authorization checks are going to be built in. It is very important with the core data services that when you select the data from the database, you immediately also check to only fetch that data for which the user is authorized for, and that is built in, and you can't skip that. You need to define that. Yeah. And then you also have behavior definitions that controls your custom buttons, your navigation, how you do the data entry in the system, which fields are mandatory, optional, read-only, that kind of stuff. That's in behavior definitions. Then you also got your OData service. That is making sure that there is communication between the database and the app. And you do that in two steps. First, you do a service definition. That is basically going to say what data am I going to offer to the Fiori app. And then you got the service binding that actually makes the communication channel. We don't dive that much into OData services in this training course because the service definition, service binding are actually quite straightforward for the purpose that we want to build our app for. So it is just there. You need to know that it exists, but we don't do much with OData services. It's all controlled in the background, and you don't need to worry about it. Two things about programming languages that are on top of your standard ABAP. You got an extension of ABAP, which is the entity manipulation language. So it is an ABAP language, but it is the ABAP language for the core data services to, as I said, read, create, update, delete records in the database. And when you say entity manipulation language, the entity is the same as the interface data definition that we saw on the previous slide. And we come back to that in the next video as well to explain a bit how that works. Also, the entity is linked to the data dictionary view. I will show a visual representation in the next video how that's going to look like. And then last but not least, we have one example from using SQL Script, and that is a language to do things with the SAP HANA database, especially when it is designed not to do the normal get me all these records and I do some stuff with it. It can potentially be slowing down your system. So they've got SQL Script as a way of doing some nice little things without actually having a lot of impact on performance. We've got one example how SQL Script can be implemented within your Fiori app, so that hopefully gets some ideas about what you can do in your specific example, and at least you've got then a working example in this training course if you want to do something similar yourself later on.